Watching News at Prime. Let's bring you this now. EFF leader Julius Malema has written to National Assembly Speaker Togo Didiza raising concerns about the capacity of the ad hoc committee tasked with probing allegations of criminal infiltration in the police. He says the current team, which comprises the evidence leader and 2 junior members, is severely overstretched. Malema warns that this could compromise the integrity of the committee's work. He also emphasized the complexity of the documentation before the committee, noting that it requires substantial administrative, legal and forensic investigative support. Malema is appealing for additional resources to be made available so that the body can conduct its work thoroughly. Well, let's stay with the story of the ad hoc committee, and all eyes will be at Vusi prison this week as controversial tenderpreneur and attempted murder accused Vusi Cat Matlala is expected to testify before the ad hoc committee. He's also accused of being a member of the so-called Big Five cartel, which allegedly infiltrated the police. Security expert Eldred de Klerk joins us this evening to talk about what we could possibly hear from Vusi prison, and that's where the ad hoc committee is headed. Eldred, good to have you. And I want us to kick off this conversation with Brown Mokhotsi and some of what he had to say about Vusi Cat Matlala. And I'd like us to just remind the viewers of some of what he had to say. So let's take a listen quickly.
They expected him as a service provider to make payment to General Masemola in the amount of 25 million and Jen Kelly in the amount of 10 million. Of the 25 million expected to be paid to Masemola, 5 million rent had already been paid and there was a balance of 20 million rent outstanding. With regard to the Kelly payment, 2 million rent had already been paid and a balance of 8 million rent was outstanding.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
And did he give you any indication of how he'd paid them, when he'd paid them, whether he was going to pay the balance?
No, we never spoke about how he paid. Usually, when you are investigating something, talking to someone, the moment, as soon as you get deeper to know how, he'll immediately doubt you.
All right, Eldred, let's get into this. And it goes without saying that Mr. Mokhotsi was challenged at length to basically provide proof. And needless to say, he walked away feeling at the end of that cross-examination like he was tired as hell. All right, let's try and get into some detail of what Vusi Cat Matlala could possibly tell the committee members. Take us through what you think we could hear from him.
Well, your clip just showed us that we had deceit, we had obfuscation, we had lies, and then, of course, we had Brown Mokhotsi. So how we are to experience a cat Vusi Matlala? He's currently in prison, and it's fitting, therefore, that they will listen to his testimony in prison because the charges he faces are serious. And the charges range from corrupt tender processes, corrupting public officials to get those tenders, and then, of course, defrauding the state. And he is painted as somebody who has sufficient guile and resources to actually lead a criminal cartel. And then at the moment also may have sufficient resources to escape justice. He is in a very precarious situation. In an earlier interview on the program, we had legal expert Roo talk about the fact that he has everything to lose. Should he basically tell the truth, which is what we expect him to do, he may implicate himself, but at the same time, the truth might serve to as extenuating circumstances and softening his likely sentence should he be found guilty. We have to remember he's innocent at the moment.
Yeah.
However, he also says that his life is at danger. So will the truth telling lead to him? That's why he's happy not to be out of prison apparently. But should telling the truth lead to his life being further endangered, then he has to strike this balance. We're hoping that he would talk about the relationship he has with respective ministers, ranging back to Minister Bekele, Minister Mchunu at the moment, he's chief of staff, to various national commissioners and other heads of department. We are hoping that the other Mkonazi at the JMPD, the Ikoleni, the EMPD, that relationship would be cleared up. And then we want to know how he came to stand in line to get the tenders he did, and what were the processes and who helped facilitate him getting it.
Yeah.
So there's a number of areas, just on the face of it, that seems fairly innocuous. He should be able to just talk freely about it. However, if he talks freely about it, how will that play itself out in the current charges he faces in front of court at the moment, and any likely charges he and any accomplice might face in the future?
We'll come back in a moment to the possible implications for Mr. Matlala should he be tempted to lie to the members of parliament. But earlier, you referenced former Minister of Police, Bekele. I want us to listen back now to a clip of Brown Mokhotsi where he appears to tell us that Minister Bekele, pretending to only have known or come to know Vusi Cat Matlala in December of 2024, may not necessarily be the full truth. Here's what Brown Mokhotsi told the Madlanga inquiry.
Let's say a cat comes, whether to any court of law or any platform, he's able to dispute that he was not John Wick. Let's say Cat was not John Wick. The point that I was trying to make is the picture that was placed on the intelligence report. It was that of Cat, and his name was written Cat underneath and John Wick. So I was trying to say, former Minister Bekele must have remembered this face when he met him for the first time in 2024.
And so there is Brown Mokhotsi essentially taking us back to a so-called intelligence report that was beamed on a screen. And I think the year he said was 2017, if I'm not lying. And John Wick basically was Vusi Cat Matlala. And so the whole point he's making here is that there's no way Bekele can tell us that he only came to know Cat Matlala in December of 2024. How worried should the former police minister be if indeed Cat Matlala says, I know him, he knew me long before December of 2024?
That will put the former minister in a fairly precarious situation. He would have been guilty of perjury. He would have his relationship questioned, his decisions questioned as minister, and there could be a review of the decisions he made as minister. And that means that his legacy as a minister, both as commissioner, which is already not covered in glory, and then as a minister that he's very proud of, may actually be sullied. So to his reputation. Then Cat Matlala then becomes the real mover and shaker and the real plot maker when it comes to the possible impeachment, let me use that word, of former ministers and current public officials so that they, in fact, go stand on trial.
One thing is for certain, though, Eldred, and this we know as a fact, and that is that Minister Bheki Cele, former Minister Bheki Cele, has already admitted to taking, I don't know whether you want to call it a gift, but make of it what you will. But he already admitted to accepting a 2-night stay at Cat Matlala's luxury apartment. I believe these are somewhere in Pretoria. The circumstances around that, the reasons as to why he decided to take this particular offer, at least we have yet to hear Mr. Matlala's version of it, but what Bheki Cele seemed to suggest to members of parliament, including, by the way, members who belong to his own political party, the ANC, which they were very uncomfortable with. He said, well, I was no longer minister, and so I didn't have to answer to anybody. The point, I guess, for Cele is that Cat Matlala, at the time, I didn't know him to be a criminal, but that could be disproved if it is found that he was John Wick. But second of all, what did Cat Matlala get in return for allowing Bheki Cele to stay at his luxury apartment for a 2-night stay? Is that the question?
That's the question, indeed. However, it's telling that here we have a minister, a former minister, and a public official who of means aspiring and even thinking and contemplating and then finally deciding to go stay in a luxury apartment. He stayed in luxury apartments before. He stayed in luxury hotels before. He's lived the life of a minister. What could, it escapes me the reason that he might have thought that this would be a good idea under any circumstances. So he has to come clean the minute Cat Vusi Matlala confirms, yes, I allowed him to stay there. It may have been more than once. And in return, it was the furthering of trust between us, the deepening of our relationship, and the promise of things in the future or payment for things that happened in the past, even if it was a gift. The Public Service Administration Code of Conduct, of which Minister Cele, former Minister Cele, and as National Commissioner would be aware of and should have internalized, including the Batsopeli principles, suggest that you do not put yourself in situations where such favors could be seen to be something that would have compromised you.
Finally then, Eldred, you already spoke about, or you've already referenced the interview I did with Ulrich Roux about the consequences for Mr. Matlala should he be tempted to lie. To you, the question is, and I framed it this way to Ulrich Roux last night, that some people may view him as someone who has nothing to lose, but we still have to remember that he is not a convicted person. He's an awaiting trial prisoner. And so, what is his propensity to embellish, add a little bit of spice, just so members of parliament could possibly get excited and therefore, by extension, members of the public? The consequences, Ulrich Roux spelled them out. But for you, my question is, what is his propensity to lie, given the circumstances in which he finds himself in? And that is that of being in prison already. And you've mentioned that he possibly is comfortable being there because he says his life is threatened.
the timing of this couldn't be any worse, I think. I think it would have helped him that he goes through his prison trial first, and then, because that has a very, very tight remit. There's fraud charges, there's other allegations, but it seems to be things he can manage. The case against him would be outlined, and his legal counsel will be able to fight that. The remit of the ad hoc committee goes beyond what he stands on trial for, because the ad hoc committee also needs to look at what was it in terms of a legislative failure, a public service leadership failure, a institutional failure, and or any kind of corrupt relationship or criminality that basically put national security at risk. So they will ask him questions beyond the scope of what he's facing charges on, and that in itself could lead to further charges. Now remember, as the legal expert, Mr. Roo said, he's under no obligation to answer all the questions put to him. He can respectfully decline, and he can say that he wouldn't want to answer it because it might potentially, incriminate, might potentially be incriminating.
Yeah.
So my belief is, one, timing of this bad for him. Secondly, legal counsel will hopefully advise him not to lie. And thirdly, to only answer the questions put to him, not embellish, not obfuscate, not seem to be running away. Keep your answers short and answer to the point, fully aware that you still have a trial to answer.
Security expert Eldred de Klerk, thank you very much. You've already whetted our appetite, and so we look forward to what Mr. Matlala is going to tell members of Parliament. Thank you.